In a society where hustle culture and side hustles often take center stage, it's important to recognize the profound benefits of a traditional 9 to 5 job. This structured work schedule, typically running from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., has been a cornerstone of professional life for many decades. In the modern world, the 9 to 5 job has often been portrayed as a monotonous routine that hinders personal growth and creativity. However, when viewed through a different lens, this way of earning can be one of the most significant advantages in one's life. In this video, we'll shed light on how a 9 to 5 job can be one of the biggest advantages in a person's life in 9 different ways. Let's begin. 1. Financial stability. The most apparent advantage of a 9 to 5 job is the financial stability by providing a continuous, steady stream of income. This structured employment offers a regular paycheck, which is a crucial factor in securing one's financial well-being. Individuals can count on a consistent income, allowing them to meet their financial obligations, including rent or mortgage payments, utility bills, and groceries. This stability forms the foundation of financial security, as it enables individuals to plan and save for their future. One of the key advantages of this predictable income is that it allows for better budgeting and financial planning. It's easier to create a budget when you know exactly how much money you'll be earning each month. You can allocate funds for necessities, savings, investments, and even entertainment without constantly worrying about fluctuating income. Moreover, a 9 to 5 job often comes with additional financial benefits, such as health insurance, retirement plans, and paid leave, which contribute to an individual's overall financial well-being. These benefits are typically not as readily available in the gig economy or in non-traditional employment settings. 2. Mental energy preservation. One of the less discussed but invaluable advantages of a 9 to 5 job is how it preserves mental energy. In an era characterized by the constant bombardment of information, decision-making, and distractions, a traditional job with set working hours offers a respite from the mental strain of constant decision fatigue. During a 9 to 5 job, employees are often working on tasks within a specific scope and under the guidance of their supervisors. This structured environment allows individuals to focus on their work without the burden of making numerous high-stakes decisions. The mental energy that is not expended on constantly choosing what to do next can be directed towards personal pursuits, whether they are creative, intellectual, or entrepreneurial. 3. Employer savings benefits. Another often overlooked advantage of a 9 to 5 job is the array of benefits provided by employers. Many traditional jobs come with employer-sponsored benefits, which can significantly enhance one's financial stability and overall well-being. These benefits can include health insurance, retirement plans, paid time off, and more. These perks not only enhance your overall compensation package, but also offer financial security and peace of mind. Health insurance, for instance, helps mitigate the financial risks associated with unexpected medical expenses. Retirement plans like 401k enable you to save for your post-employment years, ensuring financial security during your retirement. Paid time off allows you to enjoy well-deserved vacations and personal time without sacrificing income. These benefits contribute to a more holistic and secure financial picture, reducing the need for you to rely solely on your side projects for financial stability. 4. Tax benefits. A 9 to 5 job often comes with various tax benefits. Employees can take advantage of deductions and credits that can reduce their tax liabilities. These benefits can include deductions for mortgage interest, student loan interest, and contributions to retirement accounts, which directly impact an individual's financial health. Also, employers withhold taxes from employees' paychecks, ensuring compliance with tax regulations. This eliminates the need for individuals to navigate complex tax forms and deadlines, reducing the risk of tax-related financial issues. 5. Access to credit. Consistent income from a 9-to-5 job enhances an individual's creditworthiness. Lenders typically view stable employment as a positive factor when assessing credit applications. This can result in access to lower interest rates and more favorable terms on loans, such as mortgages and car loans. For those looking to make significant purchases, such as a home or vehicle, a 9-to-5 job offers financial stability that can aid in securing loans. This stability demonstrates an individual's ability to meet financial obligations, making them a more attractive candidate for lenders. 6. Effective use of time. The structured nature of a 9-to-5 job promotes the effective use of one's time. When one's day is compartmentalized into work hours and personal time, there is a sense of urgency and purpose in making the most of the available free time. As a result, many people find that they are more productive outside of their work hours, ensuring they use their time more efficiently. This structured approach to time management often leads to the realization that one doesn't have as much free time as they once thought. However, this limitation forces individuals to make the most of the hours they have, pushing them to prioritize and focus on the things that truly matter to them. This can be a powerful motivator for personal growth and the pursuit of meaningful hobbies or side projects. 7. Creating and building side projects for extra income. Contrary to the misconception that a 9-to-5 job leaves no room for pursuing personal interests, it can be an ideal platform for launching side projects and creating additional income streams. With the financial stability and preserved mental energy that a job provides, individuals can embark on side projects to generate extra income. The structured work hours can provide the discipline and financial security needed to explore entrepreneurial endeavors during non-working hours. With your financial needs covered by your 9-to-5 job, you can use your free time and weekends to work on your passion projects or side businesses. These side projects can be anything from freelance work, consulting, online businesses, or even pursuing a passion project that has the potential to become a profitable venture. This not only allows you to diversify your income sources, but also gives you the freedom to explore your entrepreneurial ambitions without the immediate financial pressure that self-employment often entails. 8. Experience and connections. A 9-to-5 job is not just about earning a living. It is an opportunity to gain valuable experience and build a network of connections. In a corporate or professional setting, individuals have the chance to learn new skills, enhance existing ones, and gain exposure to different aspects of their industry. It provides the opportunity to learn from experienced colleagues and gain insights into the industry. This knowledge and experience can be instrumental in shaping your career and personal growth. Moreover, the workplace is a hub for networking. The connections you make with colleagues, supervisors, and clients can be immensely beneficial and invaluable contacts for future endeavors. These connections can lead to new job opportunities, partnerships, collaborations, or mentorship relationships that are instrumental in one's personal and professional growth. 9. Building presence and developing routines. A 9-to-5 job instills the importance of showing up and being present. Regular attendance and engagement at work help individuals develop a strong work ethic and a sense of responsibility. This discipline not only benefits your professional life, but also spills over into your personal life, contributing to a well-rounded and responsible approach to all your commitments. When you commit to a regular work schedule, you cultivate a habit of discipline and punctuality. This, in turn, can help you establish a structured daily routine that promotes productivity and time management. As you hone these skills in your 9-to-5 job, you can apply them to your side projects, making you more efficient and effective in your endeavors. While the world of work continues to evolve, the traditional 9 to 5 job remains a cornerstone of financial stability and personal growth. It's easy to romanticize the idea of breaking free from the corporate grind and pursuing entrepreneurial dreams, but the truth is that a 9 to 5 job provides numerous advantages that often go unnoticed. It provides the foundation upon which a fulfilling and financially secure life can be built. So, while the landscape of work may continue to evolve, the 9-5 job remains a steadfast path to a brighter and more stable future.